Hello and a warm welcome to the CNBC Africa Special. I'm Gugulethu Cele. Well, today we come to you from the capital city of South Africa, where we're going to review the Executive Mayor's budget for 2015 and 2016, taking a look at the different components, which look at the Integrated Development Plan, and not only that, but the medium-term revenue and expenditure framework. How does this all work in helping Tshwane become the powerhouse city that it is poised to be by the year 2055? Well, joining me, I've got our two esteemed panelists to help us get down to the nuts and bolts of how the economic development of Tshwane is expected to rise. We've got the Executive Mayor of Tshwane, Kgosientso Ramokgopa, as well as Professor Nengwekhulu, who is Executive Director for the School of Governance at UNISA. Now, we're not alone. We are joined by a wonderful team of audience members, many of whom are representing business, different stakeholders, as well as participants in the City of Tshwane's economic development, and who will be participating in today's panel discussion by posing their questions as well as opinions to the floor. Well, let's not get any time wasted and get straight into the conversation for the day. Mayor, thank you so much for your time. Looking at the budget, you have certainly highlighted many avenues for economic development for the City of Tshwane. But before we look ahead, if we can potentially do a quick review of the significant achievements that have been achieved and highlighted whilst with you at the helm of the City of Tshwane thus far.
Thank you very much for the invite, and my greetings to the viewers. Well, we entered into a contract with the citizens of the city in the form of a manifesto when we ascended into power in 2011. We committed to a number of areas that made it possible for us to take the seat of government. I mean, first amongst these is the issue around restoring the dignity of our people. And primarily we're talking about universal access to basic services, water, electricity, and sanitation, and also extinguishing the backlogs with regards to informal settlement, the eradication of shacks. The second one was ensuring that we have growth that is labor absorbing. We're able to create a competitive economy so that we can contribute to the growth of the country. I'm talking economic growth, so that we're able to fight the scourge of unemployment. The third area was the issues around safety, making sure that our city is livable. We made commitments around how we're going to be deploying metropolis officers across the length and breadth of the city, but also using urban management functions to ensure that we are able to enhance policing, visibility, but just the general security and aesthetics of in the city. The fourth area was around the modernization of the city's governance, but also the interaction of people with the city and the people with space. And in that regard, we had committed to rolling out affordable, reliable, efficient and safe public transport, and then we have delivered REing. We're working on expanding our free Wi-Fi connectivity. As I talk to you now, we've got more than 600 sites, bigger than of any city on the African continent. And the further commitment we have made in the State of the Capital Address is to make sure that every citizen within Tshwane is within a 500-meter radius of free Wi-Fi connectivity. And then there's issues around clean governance, making sure that we sustain our unqualified audit opinion, but making sure that we remove matters of emphasis and what we achieve going forward. It's something analogous to what we refer to as a clean audit, because that reinforces people's perception on the ability of the principals to prosecute and execute their responsibilities. And the last area was to ensure that we cultivate a culture of citizen participation, because remember that what makes democracy to be robust is the ability of citizens, one, to be informed, but two, to freely participate in the affairs of the city, in the shaping of the kind of city that we all desire. And that's work in progress. I don't think you're going to arrive at a stage where you are fully satisfied that everyone is participating. So you'll continue to create an environment that allows people to make their contribution. So on all those fronts, we have made significant progress. I must say that far surpassing our own expectations. And remember that we still have another 12 months to deliver on those. So the 4 years has been the ones that allowed us, one, to make sure that we reinforce the work that the previous administration has been doing, but also take it to the next stage as we prepare for the next administration again to take it to the next level. So in essence, that's a recap of some of the things that we have promised, and indeed we have delivered. I want to argue on many of those. I think the audit outcomes of the AG on performance will confirm many of the things that I'm saying. It has been an undulating road. There's a number of potholes that you need to navigate, but I'm saying that that notwithstanding, we've made significant strides.
Professor Nengwekhulu, we've heard the Mayor touch on the issue of governance, and that's certainly where we want to bring your voice in on with regard to this. If we look at the budget for 2015-2016, 29 billion, a majority of it really going to the ongoing running of the city, with about 3 billion then put into capex expenditure. I want to get your overall sense of governance when it comes to the city of Tshwane, which remains one of the fastest growing economies in the country.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think good governance depends on the capacity to implement the programs that the mayor has presented. One of the biggest challenges that we're facing in the country is not that we don't have good policies. We have some of the best policies in the world. The challenge that we have is the implementation level. The service delivery protests that we see across the country do not reflect the absence of specific policies to deal with those issues. If you take, for instance, the municipalities have got the ward system, which is a very important organizational entity. It's the smallest organizational unit that keeps government, and specifically municipalities, in touch with the community, which means that the ward councillor should be the mouth and ears of the council as a whole and the mayor, which means that he or she should be the one who must be able to inform the community in that specific area, that in this particular area we're going to have a shortage of water. He or she will be able to do so if he or she links with the municipality, rather the water utilities department or ESCOM and so on. But I don't think what councillors are performing very effectively. They're not communicating. They may not be able to stop protests in the streets, but certainly they must be able to explain to the people. Currently, people know that there's no water or there's no money to electrify their places by going into the streets. It's a reflection of the weak system that we have across the country, and specifically on the municipalities. Now, the second important point is that a good policy requires effective implementation skills. I spent 15 years working in government in very difficult provinces, Limpopo, Eastern Cape. And I found that while the provinces have been getting issues of disclaimers in terms of the Auditor General, that reflected not necessarily the absence of a degree or diploma in that particular area of finance, but the lack of on-the-job skills to be able to deal with those. I call those type of problems soft problems. 90% of the problems that we are facing in the country are not the hard problems. The hard problem that the mayor faces is the lack of enough money to abolish all informal settlements. But the other problem that he also faces is the inability of the administrative wing of government to implement these policies that we have. I was saying that we have got a good policy over Tupile, introduced as way back as 1995. But why is it that today people have to go to the street? What has happened to Batupile? It means that at the implementation level, the program is not being effective. Now, I see the role of universities. China has got 3 main universities: UNISA, the China University of Technology, University of Pretoria. I work at the University of Pretoria. I'm at UNISA at the moment. There are a lot of things that these universities are doing, but they can do more regarding that. They can do more in terms of equipping people who work in municipalities. Perhaps one of the mistakes that we've made in South Africa for a number of years is to assume that anybody who appoint who has got a BCom, a BA administration, is necessarily suitable to be a public servant in terms of delivery. If you look at the French system, it doesn't matter how many PhDs that we have. You must first go to the National College for you to be qualified as public servant. So we must change that type of system of assuming that a degree or a diploma necessarily qualifies you to work in a specific area. We do so by having institutions that would actually deliver implementation skills, people who can implement issues of governance. You talk about the mayor talking about the metropolis. No, one of the things that they require is the skill of being able to communicate with their own sectors, if they are assigned to a particular sector. They shouldn't see themselves in terms of enforcing the law, but they must also see themselves as educators of the public in terms of the laws that apply within the Tshwane Metro and any other area. For me, those are the type of skills that we have. I don't think universities in South Africa across the board have done enough to assist municipalities, local government. For instance, there's no degree in a number of universities focusing on this sphere of government called the local government, represented by the metros and other district municipalities. There's no qualification of that nature. We offer what we call public administration, essentially based on foreign concepts of service delivery. There's nothing wrong in actually borrowing information from other areas. But we actually have not, since 1994, adapted our curriculum in order to respond to the new needs. You still find universities, for instance, criticizing teachers who produce very poor students. Some of them are meant to be teachers who cannot pass an examination set for their own learners. But my question I asked, if you go to the shop and you find poor quality of bread, you don't blame the retailer, you must blame the baker. Your teachers don't produce themselves, they're produced by an institution, university. So why is it that you find professors standing on the rooftops criticizing the quality of teachers, where in fact they're producing these teachers from 2000? Universities produce teachers. So for me, those are some of the challenges that universities must see themselves first and foremost as South African before they can attack the concept of international institution. They respond. Lastly, a number of them do not design their programs in response to the national policies. For instance, we have got a national development plan, Vision 2030. You don't have to agree with it, but it's the national policy of the government of the day. So programs must be actually designed in such a way that you respond. American universities don't produce un-American students. You go everywhere. When you talk about the Asian tigers, in China, for instance, even their doctors are trained in such a way that they also understand indigenous medicine that we need for years. We don't have it here. Perhaps it's because in South Africa, we want to be more European than South African. I was telling somebody that when you used to go down the, what is called the tree hut, there was a very big sign which says, "Welcome to the tree hut, gateway to Africa," which means that we're not part of Africa. So we have got lots of challenges that I think we should deal with ourselves. So the mayor can succeed in this program if he as universities also help to develop the type of skills that will implement most of these problems that are in the budget.
Professor, you've said quite a lot, and clearly we've gotten a reaction from the floor. And I'd like us to zone into one of the topics that you've mentioned, which is not only the implementation, but the linkage between the IDP that we have from a city perspective and the National Development Plan. Mr. May, maybe if you can walk us through some of the larger themes with regard to how this helps connect. If the NDP has a vision for 2030, and Tshwane has a vision for 2055, are these two on the same page and merging to not only develop Tshwane as an economic hub and world-class city for the rest of the continent, but how does it tie into the National Growth Plan as well?
Well, if there were to be a hierarchy of plans, the NDP will be superior in that it articulates a commonly shared vision of the future. So it articulates the kind of policy interventions that are required to ensure that you have unemployment less than 10%. I think they're putting it at 6%. And the primary requirement is that the GDP growth must register 5.4% year on year over the period to ensure that we are able to arrive at that stage. So that's the overarching plan. And then we articulated, even before the time of Vision 2030, what we call Vision 2055, which is our own unique version of the kind of capital city we want to construct. So we had to make sure that it gets to link to Vision 2030 because some of its aspirations must help to ensure that by 2030 we arrive at the objectives as articulated by the NDP. Now, there are three things that are occurring in the global south with regards to the governance of cities, three transitions. The first one is what I call the urban transition. So there's rapid urbanization, large numbers of people coming into the space that we call the city. The Stats SA suggests that there's conservatively, there's 10,000 new people coming into these spaces each and every month. And the majority of these people don't bring any new skills. They are unable to participate in the mainstream economy. And if anything, they locate in the periphery. They are reinforcing what I call the apartheid morphology, the physical construction of the apartheid space, where the poor are living far from centers of economic production. The World Bank makes the point that the poor spend up to 70% of their incomes traveling. And that's why we have initiated a program called Tshwane, to make sure that, one, we bring people closer to centers of economic production. So we're removing people from informal settlements closer to the CBD, so that they travel less distances, but also by creating an opportunity through REing to allow them to travel through a world-class public transport system. And then you'll be able to reduce emissions because you are traveling lesser distances, and we are discouraging people from using private cars. And that's one of the aspirations in the NDP, is that it must be a low-carbon economic growth. So you must be able to address the energy mix. The second transition is what I call the energy transition. I mean, the problems with regards to electricity. By the way, electricity is just one leg of the energy mix, but it accounts for over 99.9%, I want to argue, of the energy mix. So we must reduce the reliance on electricity, and then and the NDP makes that point, introduce renewables. And that's the work that we're doing in the city. For an example, we are working with the University of Pretoria, like Prof has said. I mean, just localize some of the research that is done in the classroom to resolve the social conflict in society, using hydropower, the gravitational forces of water to generate electricity. So we are confident that if we're to retrofit the pilot that we have done in many of our dams, in many of our wastewater treatment plants, we can be self-sufficient going forward. Now, it's not the height of folly, it's something that is possible, that can be done. So that's how you are beginning to reconfigure the energy mix. And that's work that is happening. We've got the solar energy farm in the area of Bronkhorstspruit that will generate 20 megawatts. We are exploring now rooftops, and also the contribution of gas to be reticulated to the end consumer, households in particular. And then the last transition is the demographic transition. The population is increasingly becoming younger and younger. 66% of the total population in Tshwane is 35 years and younger. So what that means is that whatever interventions we are initiating, whatever policy interventions we are triggering, must be predisposed to resolve what could potentially be problems that are confronted by this sector of our society. And the NDP makes the point that as we become younger and younger, the opportunities you have is that you've got more people to participate in the labor market, well, assuming that they've got the requisite skills, which is not the case, by the way. Yeah. So you still need to resolve that problem, because it can be what I refer to as a perfect storm. So you've got the majority of your people is young people, they are unskilled and therefore can't participate, and that results in some degree of disgruntlement and grievance, and they are well connected, and those are the ingredients that were present in what we call the Arab Spring. Well, we don't know when is the summer coming, but the point I'm making is those revolutions were rudderless because they were virtually connected, and that's why the gains of the struggles in Egypt have been reversed now. You have gone to an era worse than Mubarak, when in fact people have mounted struggles there. So you need to resolve that problem, and it manifests itself differently in the space that we call the city, in the form of Nyaupe. I mean, I want to argue it's a social problem for now, but I want to suggest to you that it's a security problem if you don't resolve it. And those are the kinds of issues that gets to confront us. And that's why we have initiated a number of projects around what we call Tsepo 10,000, As I speak to you now, we've invested over 270 million of contracts given to young people between the age groups of 21 and 35 so that they can actively participate in the economy. We are not in the business of employing people. Government is not in the space of employing people. It's in the space of creating a dispensation that allow entrepreneurs to thrive. And that's why we are creating incentive policy framework that allows investments to come in, the participation of young people on the strength of our fiscals who are able to invest. That 3.9 billion rands on CAPEX for the next financial year, a significant percentage of it will be invested in young people. So in that way, you are going to help the NDP to realize the objective of whittling down unemployment from, by the way, there was a labor force survey that was released yesterday.
That's great.
Unemployment has increased by 2 percentage points from the last quarter. Now, this is ominous signs, and all indications are that it will get worse going forward.
Having said that, Mayor, I'd like to challenge you a little bit here.
Yes.
You've certainly highlighted the plan, which is the IDP, which is relatively linked to the NDP, highlighting the key issues as you've highlighted, the infrastructure, entrepreneurial development, as well as connectivity and the advancement of these cities. But I want to put it in your hands that how do you change the mind of the average Tshwane citizen? Because all of this comes at a cost or in an uncomfortable phase of development. You talk about the development of alternative energy sources. Unfortunately, residents in Tshwane need to pay for this in double-digit increases in tariffs, not only for water, but also electricity. You talk about this Wi-Fi revolution as well. Okay, that's coming for free at the moment, but also has its caps and its limitations. You talk about developing entrepreneurs, but as you also allude to, the skills and the mindset and the education base isn't there. How do we translate this so that the average Tshwane citizen actually understands how this can work to their benefit?
But let me offer a critique that can border on being career limiting. And this is the point, is that my view is the following, is that when you look at the increases that are suggested by ESCOM, they look at their own CAPEX requirement, how to improve and refurbish their own CAPEX, and then they arrive at the rent value, and they need to get that from the end consumer in the form of tariff increases. So ESCOM does that. On the other side, Rainwater does exactly that. They need to refurbish the aging infrastructure. They do a computation of what is required, and they say this is the proposed increase. The consumer doesn't see it that way. The consumer has got a basket of minimum services. His water, his electricity, is everything in one basket. Electricity is going up by 12%. Water is going up by 13.5%. I'm talking the city of Tshwane. Yes. Sanitation is going up. Waste collection is going up by 15%. But the currently concluded wage negotiations in the public sector is 7%. Exactly. So it means that the consumer is worse off. So that's a problem that you are confronting. So people are becoming poorer and poorer. If anything, the Gini coefficient is going to grow because the rich don't feel this impact. I mean, what is the impact of 13%, 13.5% increase in water consumption when I'm in fact making millions and millions on a daily basis? So it's an economic conflict that can result into a security problem going forward. Mm-hmm. And the people will speak through the ballot. I mean, if the bread basket is empty, then the ballot will speak. So that's a problem that is confronting you. And the argument we've been making is that as local government, the pressure is here. Everyone feels that pressure here. And then they are going to mount these struggles that the Prof has asserted.
Service delivery protests.
Service delivery
And.
So, and the issues around renewable, by the way, they don't come cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as technology metamorphoses, improves, I think we're going to find cheaper options of doing that, but it's very expensive, more expensive than generating electricity from a coal-powered power station because of the mineral endowments. Is there, you can be able to mine it and produce. And this is my argument, is that part of the development alternative that is being propagated globally. You know, the industrial north has benefited from coal power over a period of time. Now it's our turn, they say no, but there's issues around climate change. Wait a bit, look for alternatives. I think it's unfair. So I'm saying we have equal but differentiated responsibility. And that's an articulation we must make as an organized voice of local government. And it's got other implications. We generate the majority of our income from energy, electricity distribution. So when you bring down the share of electricity, increase renewables, in fact, it's almost suicidal because that income is going to diminish, but the demand with regards to social infrastructure continue to increase almost exponentially, but there is nothing that grows at the same rate. So it's a conundrum that we are facing. And that's why I make the point that running a local government is more complex than running provincial or national government. And that's why I said earlier on, it's almost career limiting. No, but they must be said, these things, because we get to be confronted on a daily basis. We must confront the issues and say that this is the situation that gets to confront us. We must raise this money to invest in this Riaha Tshwane, to extinguish the informal settlement.
Yeah.
We must raise this money to make sure that we cater for the poor indigenous household. Now, as the global economic recession is rampant, there's no signs that it's going to recede. It means that there's more and more people that go into the bracket of being poor. So they come to the city and say, we're indigent, please subsidize. So we must give them 100 kilowatt of electricity for free, 12 kiloliters of water for free. So that demand goes up, but the revenue that is being generated gets to be diminished because they are not contributing. So it's a scale that is going to result in the collapse of the local state as we know it. We can sustain it as big cities. The big 8, we can do it. But smaller municipalities in Ramokgopa, they are going to find it very difficult. They are going to rely more and more on nationally raised taxes. And that's the problem that is confronting you. And that's why you need to invest in young people to become entrepreneurs. They must be the ones who must free themselves. So the local state must create a dispensation that allows them an opportunity to do that.
Mayor, I'm glad you've touched on all those topical issues. We've got several responses from the audience, but we do have to go to a quick ad break. Professor, when we do come back, I'd like to get your insights on the challenges being faced, obviously, by local government and the need for change in mindset, not only from its own employees, but other stakeholders and participants in the economy. And when we do return, I understand there are some questions in the audience. We will start off with those. But do stay with us. We continue with this coverage of the Tshwane Budget Breakfast Briefing here in the City of Tshwane right after the short ad break. A warm welcome back to the CNBC Africa Special, where we are reviewing the budget for the City of Tshwane for the year 2015 to 2016. I'm still joined by the Executive Mayor of the City of Tshwane, Kgosientso Ramokgopa, as well as Professor Harry Nengwekhulu. And just before the ad break, we delved into basically the tough job that you have, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to quickly weigh in on your thoughts here, Professor, which obviously ties into the key elements that you mentioned: education, implementation, and overall follow-ups with the projects that government undertakes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think in this country we are facing some of the issues are political problems. The mayor talked about issues that might be political, career limiting. One of the things that we have actually continued with since 1994 is the issue of duplicating political institutions. In terms of delivery, provinces don't deliver anything. They suck a lot of resources. So in a normal political system, we should actually do away with the provinces, because unlike other countries, like Nigeria, that a good state, they've got to solve a particular problem. You go to Canada, it's a problem. We don't have a political problem that necessitated the retention of the provinces, even increasing them from 4 to 9. No, I work in the provinces for 15 years, and I always felt that the resources that I have, I was managing in Limpopo about 22 billion rand, in Eastern Cape 26 billion rand, and I was saying, why don't we transfer education to municipalities, because these are the vehicles for delivery of the services. So that is the first stage that we have. Now we have got 10 departments of education, 10 departments of health, and municipalities also have got health clinics. why do we need 10 departments of health? And we spend a lot of money on those. So I think that's the first challenge. The second challenge that the mayor faces is that the high level of expectations were only 21 years old. No. And people expected that from 1994 up to now, they will have to get free electricity, free water. And I remember hearing one lady talking to one of the medias, saying no, she didn't understand why 20 years after freedom, no, black people still don't have a house. But the mayor operates within a budget. No, we live in a cash economy. No, when you have got no cash, you cannot deliver electricity. There had been a myth that had been propagated that, you know, for ESCOM to deliver electricity must be privatized. No, the inefficiencies that might happen in the state, institutions, parastatals, have got nothing to do with the fact that they're state agencies. It has something to do with the lack of particular skills that are required to do that. Once you privatize, the privatization depends on maximization of profits. So the electricity will be more expensive. Even currently, I'm not convinced that the private sector operates much better than. I've been to banks. You find in lunchtime, when people are actually free to go and do their banking, you find 2 tellers and spend more time in the queue. You go to a shop, there are 10 people ahead of you. You just want to buy 1 loaf of bread. You spend 30 minutes. So the theory is completely wrong. Lastly, one important point that we should know. This country operates on a capitalist economic model. So you can't expect a capitalist system to generate resources in terms of socialism. It never happens that way. So people need to accept that you can't say you want a flat rate to pay electricity. It doesn't operate that way because ESCOM also needs money to buy coal, to buy oil. So I think there's a political challenge, both the mayor and the other parties, to try to communicate a clear image that the fact that people have to buy has something to do with the system. It's a contradiction of the two terms.
I'm going to ask you to pause there, Professor, because you have highlighted a few points, but we can't ignore the role of the private sector. They do contribute to tech sectors as well as economic growth in the country. But I want us to get a few questions from the floor now. We'll take questions in a series of 2s. We've got our first question in the front here.
My name is Russell Lomashigo. I'm a member of the mayoral committee responsible for community safety in the city of Tshwane. My question will not go to the executive mayor because it will be career limiting. Goes to Prof there. Goes to Prof there. Prof, I have not yet come across a clear definition of what a service protest is, that what you spoke about. When you say it's people are protesting, and you call it the word that you used, service protest, service delivery protest. I have not come across a very clear definition of what this word means. One, you go to Mamelodi, you put up roads, and people in Mamelodi, you are bringing a service as the city. And people in Mamelodi, in that area, in that section, go to the street, not because you are putting a road, because they feel the CLO that is appointed here to run this project by the municipality is the same CLO who was running another project in another area. Is that a service? Is that a protest related? Do you want to count those people when you give statistics that there were 10 this type of protest in the city? You say there are 10. That's why I'm saying I can't get a clear definition. You want to build a dam to provide people with water. You bring everything, the money, the technicians, there's a camp, the site is established, and immediately the dam is about to be built. Then people stand at the gate and say, we want to be employed. You employ 20 people because the amount allows you as an entrepreneur to employ 20. And the other 50 say, no, we're getting to the streets. We also want to be employed.
We'd also like to get another question from the floor.
My name is Nolutando Mukoni. I come from an institution called Doro Global Consulting. I'd like to acknowledge the Honorable Mayor and the Honorable guest and all the guests here. Honorable Mayor, I listened very carefully to your State of the Capital address. There is something in me that is very strong, and I think very soon I'll be doing research around that. I don't understand the issue of the squatter camps and the squalor and the housing rollout RDP program for housing, which seems to concentrate at removing those people who are in the squalors so that when they are removed, then they can move into an RDP house. I don't know. My personal experience and little survey which I've done tells me that a majority of those people are not coming from that actual local area. It's people who are coming from outside this particular area and have come here either for jobs or any other thing. And then they seem to be prioritized in terms of getting housing at the cost of the budget of a municipality or a province that they do not come from. And my little experience has also taught me that if you go back to their places of origin, they've got beautiful homes, beautiful structures, they've got water, they've got electricity, and even to emphasize more, within rural communities, showing that rural development is taking place in South Africa. And then when they get here, they get an RDP house before even a person from this area gets it. And is it a professor? And the professor has just alluded to the fact that we want socialist solutions for a capitalist state.
I think we'll get the first question from the professor, a response with regard to the clear definition of what a service delivery protest is.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The protest, whether by 10 people or 100 or 200 out there, actually an expression of a good governance, because democracy without good governance is useless. And secondly, sometimes when they're very small, they're articulating a particular issue. Because the services that we provide to people are not necessarily what they expect. No, we tend to assume that once we provide RDP houses, there shouldn't be any complaints. The reality is that everybody would want to live in the house that I can afford. I can afford. So they don't necessarily want to stay in RDP houses. They want to stay in houses that have electricity and water. That's the problem that the poor face. They want water and electricity, but they cannot afford to pay for water and electricity. The type of problem that they can't escape from that. It's an expression of poverty. Thirdly, the issue why they go to the street also reflects the poor communication between political leadership and the people. If you take an example of the issue that we dealt with at the moment, of the so-called xenophobia, it is not a police problem. Police cannot solve that problem. The Metro Police cannot solve the problem. It's a political problem that must solve at a political level. So we're assigning the police the function that they're not trained for. And the only way they might want to do that, they might have arrest people. Arresting people does not solve the problem. It's a fundamental problem. So for me, even if you put the road, it means that they are using the road issue. They might use the problem of electricity as a vehicle, an instrument by means of which they express their own frustration within the society. So we should support the idea of people marching. It strengthens our democracy. Of course, we must make it possible that that demonstration does not express itself in violence within the society. So I think those are the challenges that government faces. And of course, there are higher expectations, as I said before. People expect things, even when they've got no cars. You saw in Northern Cape, they were fighting for a third road. 99.9% of those people had no vehicles. So they will pick up something that is politically sensitive in able to communicate their message. So we need to, as political leaders, one of the things that personally I've noticed, I was talking to some group that came from one of their metros, and they said one of the problems that is happening is that politicians are actually avoiding doing the job that belongs to them and try to use the police to solve political problems. I think that's the problem that we're having in the country.
Professor, thank you so much for your response. MMC, I hope you're satisfied with that, but I think it also goes down to changing the mindsets of South Africans. When you're unhappy with something, maybe dialogue is best first before blocking roads and inciting violence. To come to the question that was addressed by Mrs. Mokoni with regard to the RDP housing, Mayor, the people, number one, is it good to give people their own infrastructure and maybe the land, sell it to them and have them develop it, and how to control the population management with regard to that. The wrong people basically benefiting from the RDP housing project and the plans going forward for this land where the squatter camps, former squatter camps, and what will happen to them going forward.
Thanks for the question, Ms. Mukone. I think in the quest to formulate the question, she provides what, in my considered opinion, is a clinical characterization of the housing problem in this country. Because she's perfectly right. I mean, you find that the majority of the people who are living in those conditions of squalor in the informal settlement, they've got their primary residence somewhere in the rural hinterland because of the repelling forces there and the apparently attractive forces here. They locate here, and they relate to this as transient spaces. What do I mean by transient spaces? You just need to come to these urban centers during long weekends, Easter and the Christmas period. The roads are deserted, they've gone home. No, they relate to this. It's not their primary space. It's this generation, my generation, and the next generation that are going to relate to these spaces as their primary spaces. So when I go home, I go to Atteridgeville. But my mother, when she says she's going home, she's going to Limpopo, Ramokgopa. And that's the generation that, well, over time, through natural forces and attrition will go away. But the point is the following. We are going to introduce a number of housing typologies. The first one, Reaga Tshwane. At the heart of Reaga Tshwane is the provision of service stands. So go to Mamelodi, you've removed people from the informal settlement of Phomolong, brought them closer to Nelmapias. We are starting now with removing the biggest informal settlement in Tshwane, Brazzaville, Jessville, Phomolong, in Atteridgeville, closer to Fort West. So in that instance, we are going to provide them service stands. So we cut a stand, it's bigger than the RDP stand, provide potable water, stand connection, water, electricity, and sanitation. We surface the road. The road will have a street name. We'll give you a title deed. You put your check there. And as and when people accumulate, they'll be able to build their own houses. I mean, you go to the oldest RDP settlement called Lotus Garden. 20% to 25% of those houses have been improved over a passage of time. So our people, as they have the earning power increases, they are able to invest in their own assets. So I agree with you, that's what we want to do. The second one is provide social housing. Allow for someone who's a teacher, for an example, who has come here, has got a primary residence somewhere in Ramokgopa, has no intentions of staying here, is only here because of job opportunity, to rent an apartment in the CBD. And that's why we have a project called Tembelile, right in the middle of the CBD, just for someone to rent, and then he or she can go home to Ramokgopa because he or she relates to that place better. So I'm talking about those are the type of housing typologies that we are introducing in the city. And we are saying in the interim, whilst we are still waiting to provide those service stands, whilst we are still waiting to provide that social housing, people need water and electricity now. So we are going to provide to them, and that's this program called Electricity for All. I think we have assigned something like 250 million just for that project. And this electricity is portable. When I say portable, when we move them, we simply lift it and take it to their permanent, to the areas where they are going to locate permanently. So that's the work that we are doing in the city. But I guess that there needs to be a deeper conversation around the model of the provision of the RDP house as we know it today. That conversation must happen. We can avoid it for now for many other reasons, but it's going to confront us in the near future. Whether you are going to be able to afford the kind of delivery that we've been promising our people. We know the rate of delivery. We have people in this city who have been on the waiting list since 1996. Even today, there's no hope that they're going to get that house. And the proliferation of the informal settlement is not a complete indicator of the extent of the backlogs. There are people who are staying in the backyard. I mean, people who are originally from the townships, they don't choose to go to the informal settlement. They stay in the backyard, or they stay with their parents there. But they've still applied. So the housing backlog is huge. It continues to grow at the current rate of delivery, just to extinguish the backlogs, assuming that there's no future growth, which is implausible. We are going to take, at the current rate of delivery, it will take 25 years to extinguish it. So you can see, it's not sustainable. You need to find new methods of doing this, and we must allow our people an opportunity to invest in this new asset class by creating service stands.
I hope that has responded to your question quite perfectly, Ms. Mokoki. I'd like us to zone in now onto this dream of moving Tshwane to its utopian vision, this vision for 2055. And for this city to be a striving and thriving, successful economic hub, it needs incomes, it needs revenues. And those revenues also need to be filtrated through to the residents that stay in Tshwane. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to run through the revenue lines. And 61% of Tshwane's revenues currently comes from service charges, 21% from property taxes, but 0% from investment income. Now, how do we tie this in with the amount of funds that you've allocated to SMMEs development? You mentioned the TEPO 10,000 project. How do we also get the buy-in of private sector participants and foreign direct investors so that the investment income that is currently standing at 0 actually boosts to a double-digit sustainable level that will see Tshwane develop from an economic perspective?
Well, I don't think it's a utopian view. I think it's both probable and plausible. And many of the things that we have asserted in the state of the capital that gets to be supported by the budget are ongoing projects. I mean, the work that we are doing with the automotive sector to make sure that we create an automotive hub, the side of Roslyn, BMW has got ambitions of injecting billions into that area. So we are going to help them through investment incentives to make it possible for them to get better returns for their money. Remember that for us, the attraction is less about the money that comes into the city coffers, but more about creating employment opportunities and fighting poverty. And that's why we have approved the investment attraction and retention policy. What that does, it defines a number of bands or thresholds. If you bring investment of this quantum into this area, because it's geographically sensitive, we want to address, make intervention in economically distressed areas. You get, for an example, a rates bursary of this much over a period, maximum period of 5 years. So that's one thing that we are doing. The second one is the reliability of supply. It's very key. I mean, one of the best example is of public-private sector relationship is the work we are doing with BMW with regards to the biomass plant that we have in the Bronkhorstspruit area. It's up and running. BMW is able to meet 30% of its base load using that, the biomass plant. So we are able to demonstrate that this partnership is a symbiotic one. So it's not parasitical. So they benefit from this relationship. We benefit from that relationship. And going forward, we are extending the exclusive use of the landfill site that is close to the Roslyn plant of BMW for them to extract energy and use it also to meet the base load that is there. So this is a practical demonstration of what is possible. And that's why when I'm making the point that it's not utopian, it's things that are currently happening. We shared with you just now the work that we are doing with the TEPO 10,000. When we started, people said, this is the height of folly, this thing will never happen. It's a political gimmick. It's not possible that we can be able to affirm young people, 10,000 of them in this program. But it's an issue of political will, just be bold and aggressive. And as I speak to you now, we have given contracts to the value of 273 million. By next year, this time, conservatively, it will be at $500 million, but I'm confident that we can push it up to $1 billion rand. So we are demonstrating our faith in the prospects of these young people to grow by investing the fiscus. So it's the state that leads, and then once the state leads, injects and lubricates this business, the market forces will take over. Like Prof says, We are not insulated from the fact that it's a capitalist economy. People want to maximize returns, but I think there must be a social objective. That social objective for us is the creation of decent employment opportunities going forward. And therefore, once we are able to have growth that is labor absorbing, more and more people get to be graduated from the indigent register. They participate meaningfully in the mainstream economy, and then we are able to collect revenue, and then we are able to invest back in social infrastructure. So that's the work that we are doing. I mean, additional work to encourage business to come here. We're freeing them from bulk infrastructure contributions. We'll be launching a project now, I think before the end of June, 16,000 units project worth 3 billion rand by private sector. We have said, no, the responsibility of bulk infrastructure, leave it to us. Make sure that you improve the top structure, different housing typologies, but the condition is that you must train young people from the area so they have got a training site there and they get to be employed on the project, apply their skills, accumulate or grow their experience, and then they'll be able to participate post the project in other initiatives in the city. So that's the work that we're doing. We announced the issues around investing in the car wash facility. That's one of the most thriving businesses in the township.
I've heard that you have sentiments about this, that it's not just about showing off your German cars.
Yeah, you know, our relationship with the car wash is about demonstrating my economic and social mobility. So I pretend to be going to a car wash, but the intention is to show my friends that I've arrived. So we want to resolve that problem. What we want to do is we want to guarantee young people. So these are existing ones. So we're not going to reproduce other people. So suddenly we're not going to manufacture, discover someone who's been in the car wash. We know where they are because we know where to find them. Group them into a cooperative, give them a huge piece of land, invest, put infrastructure as a city in that piece of land, buy them the necessary equipment, install free Wi-Fi. There must be a chisanyama. You know the township experience. Because going to a car wash must be a destination. So you wake up and say, I want to go to that place. Our encounter with the car wash now, as you drive, you see these chaps, these boys watching, you say, oh, let me wash the car. No, it must be a destination. So we want to take it there. But the key is for us to show faith in that industry by saying the following. We've got a fleet of about 11,000, I think, cars. We will say so many of these cars will be washed in that car wash. So they know there's an annuity. There's a steady income of money that is coming. Even if you decide for some reason that you are not going to wash there, they know that the City of Tshwane is coming, and they are able to make projections going forward. And that's how you grow the industry. And I'm sure going forward, if they're ambitious enough, new ideas are going to come with regards to what is possible going forward.
Mayor, I'm going to have to leave it there because it's plausible, as you said, achievable goals that you have certainly highlighted. Unfortunately, we have run out of time to address other issues and take questions from the floor. But Professor, just to close off with this vision and this drive to make Tshwane this economic hub of the continent, are we on the right track and do mindsets need to change?
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to go back to education. You see, the issue of unemployment is not going to disappear because the economy has changed. The kind of skills that were, if there are skills at all, were given to the youth are not compatible with the demands of the new society in which we live. So the institutions need to change the profile of skills. You know, I've been in Singapore on 2 occasions, and I found a very different system. You know, almost 99% of the households are ICT literate. The mayor has introduced YF, but we also need to do in the family so that the end of that way. So universities and other institutions need to change. You know, the problem here in South Africa, we celebrate quantity. You know, you see the ritual of matric. We don't select the quality that we have. We said we have 76% the pass rate. Now, if you look at that, you know, 20% is the one that is capable. Last week, there was research data that the half of the students coming from matric drop out of the university. I work in the provinces. Some of the things that were supposed to have passed, it's not a pass at all. So we need to move away from that type of mentality and develop skills that change. The third point that we have, South Africans who have got a mentality that to be capable of doing something, you need a university degree. People don't want to do technical. When I was in exile, I used to point for scholarship. There was a much difference between South African scholarship that we gave South African and Zimbabweans. Zimbabweans, you tell them that there's a country that is offering a diploma in mechanical engineering diploma. They will go. South Africans wanted to go and do a degree in politics and economics. So even today, you find a generation of the young people still going to areas that are not compatible with the vision that the mayor is presenting. So we need to change that. For me, it's the opposition that way. I always tell people that don't do what I did in my generation. I don't want to see a young person doing a diploma in human resources. I can pick up human resources in the street. There are lots of them available. So we need to change that particular area for me. Yeah.
Controversial statements, which we hope will not unease some audience members, but we do appreciate your sentiments. Unfortunately, we have run out of time for this conversation that is recorded here for CNBC Africa, but the debate and the questions can still continue to address certain avenues of the budget speech that have not been addressed here today. A big, big thank you to both my panelists, the Executive Mayor of the City of Tshwane, Kgosientso Ramokgopa, as well as Professor Harry Nengwekhulu, who is the Executive Director for the School of Governance at UNISA. While the plan is in place, the numbers have been set aside, and hopefully it's a story that will take place in motion to reach the vision for the City of Tshwane 2055. Join us again when we highlight more features about the City of Tshwane and its growth trajectory. For CNBC Africa, I'm Gugulethu Cele. Have a wonderful day further.